Today, we want to talk about how we are living through a moment of competing futures where different people and companies have different visions that are now starting to collide. There are some people who see AI as the ultimate teammate, empathetic, helpful, deeply personal to you, and others who see this as a dangerous force quietly reshaping how not just people, but especially young people think, feel, and form relationships. And this week, there were just many competing stories that were so hard to ignore that today we're going to piece them together for you. And both of them point to one similar truth. And that is the future of AI isn't just about how smart it is, it's more about who it becomes to us.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Sabba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools.
Common Sense Media just released a report on AI companions like Character AI, Replica, and Nomi. They basically tested them alongside Stanford's Brainstorm Lab and came to the conclusion that these tools, so if you're not familiar with like Character AI and these ones, they're basically like chatbots and whatnot, but they basically said that these tools pose unacceptable risk to minors, so basically anyone under 18, and should not be used by anyone under 18. Why? Because they said these AI companions are designed to form emotional bonds that don't really have the ethical guardrails that humans have. And
Right.
when kids get access to these, the report basically said that the kids then have easy access to role playing and sexual content. They have access to harmful stereotypes and misinformation. There's suggestions sometimes for self harm, like we saw, I think, a couple months ago, that
Right.
a case where the kid committed suicide. There's claims of being real, sentient, and even emotionally dependent. And basically, they said there's just a massive gap in safety, age verification, long term development protections, and things like that. Now, one of the doctors that they worked with, Dr. Nina Vasan, said this isn't a technology issue or a technology crisis. This is a public mental health crisis. And what I thought was so interesting about that was this same week, our friends Connor Grennan and Jaden Schaefer, who do the Applied AI podcast, which is absolutely amazing, sat down with the CEO of Microsoft AI, Mustafa Suleyman, who is also the author of The Coming Wave. And he had a completely different vision and mindset towards personal AI. Now, if you do remember, Mustafa Suleyman, prior to being at Microsoft, was the co-founder of Pi AI, which also had a huge focus on being this personal, emotionally intelligent AI for you. And so for him, AI isn't just a teammate, it is your companion. And that is the language that Microsoft really does adopt. Now, in the interview, he describes AI not as a software, but as a digital species, a partner that grows with you, learns your preferences, understands your tone, and helps you get through both personal and professional moments. Here are some of the things he said. He said, imagine an AI helps you navigate a tense conversation with your partner, coaches you through a financial decision, supports your mental health, and then switches gears to be able to help you plan your day, plan a spreadsheet, prep for a meeting. And what I thought was so interesting about that in particular is usually if you are dealing with a personal issue, it can sometimes affect your work. And so can this AI now help bridge the gap between regulating your emotions in that way? And I think it's so important for people to know that this is not some futuristic scenario that these people are hypothesizing about. This technology that is here, that is usable, it might not be perfect, but it is very much in people's hands. And so one of the other things Mustafa says in the interview, he says, trust doesn't come from utility alone. It comes from tone, kindness, and the relationship. So, Stefan, on one side, we have AI companions forming deep, unsupervised relationships with teens that Common Sense Media says is so dangerous, in fact, that it should be completely banned from minors. And on the other hand, we have the most powerful companies in the world saying, hey, this is like the vision for the future, and relationships are going to be better, work's going to be better, we're going to solve our problems better. We always talk about how it's so important to not be passive observers, really not trying to invoke that sense of fear, but really awareness. But if you are a parent, an educator, you have to really be able to understand and contextualize what this means for you. And Stefan, how do you see these competing priorities from these two different groups? Because they're pretty significant groups.
Yeah, I think that the way to look at this, if you think back, right, you don't have to think back, think to the present, right, on the internet. There's stuff students can learn. There's the everyday realities of just conversation and the news and those types of things. And then there's sites that we probably don't want very young people to go to, that they probably still go to one way or the other. Some of them are inappropriate in different ways, right, whether they're criminally aligned or some other types of things. And I think when you look at AI, because it's general purpose and because obviously there is a lot being done to build relationships, to personalize kind of the AI so it can be useful to you, right? Just high quality personal assistant is, then when you go beyond the general conception of a general purpose technology towards, okay, this can be your friend. And it can be your friend, like you can have a friend who's not very nice, right? Is evil, manipulates you. And your friend can be really helpful. And I think part of the goal is to develop AIs that can be good friends and maybe not the evil, manipulative friends that can do bad things. There are people who have been encouraged by other people to commit suicide or whatever, and they've done that, right? So I think the problem with this approach, common like sense media a bit, is that it's like this blanket thing. It creates this blanket prohibition. Like even within character AI, I've seen it. There are some bots where you're like, okay, they're trying to direct you. Maybe this is a place you want to have a quote unquote adult conversation. But there's other ones where it's, hey, this teacher can help you with your homework, or this is professor, right? There's all these other kind of different kind of bots in there that can develop. And in that applied AI podcast, Suleyman addresses this a little bit, not a little bit more indirectly, but he talks about how these are becoming your personal companions. But one of the things he brings up is people are starting to say, they still sound like a little generic, right? It's more like a generic friend. And they want to individualize and personalize the AIs. And he's like, we do want to do that, but there is this kind of fundamental tension. As a company, we don't want the AIs to engage in certain types of conversations. But he's like, it's an engineering challenge, but it's a philosophical challenge. Like, where do you draw the line between these types of relationships? And they're all being similar. But to me, it doesn't help to just say students shouldn't use these. And there's two levels. Students should use these. Okay. Just say students shouldn't use these. They don't care. They're going to use them anyhow. Even just think of smoking. We used to not want kids to smoke, and they had to actually go get a physical product, but they still found ways to or drink, right? And they still found ways to get these actual products, and they still drank and smoke. And there's actually these theories that say when you prohibit them, they're more likely to consume them. So just issuing a report that students shouldn't use chatbots is irrelevant, in my opinion. And then there's the second level. You shouldn't use them at school, which is a little bit easier to enforce. A school can try to block every chatbot that exists. The problem with that is then it creates a false impression. They're not going to talk to the students about it because it's, oh, they can't access the chatbot here, so I can ignore it. And we should be having productive conversations with students about what are these different types of chatbots? What do they do? What are some of the ideas behind them? Even if you say, okay, what major companies are behind these, creates a little bit of a check now. I mean, character eyes. I think back with Google, right? So, I mean, some of their chatbots, it's not as helpful. It's different than somebody running a chatbot from some country you've never heard of, and they're trying to extract all your money, right? So I think when you try to just say people shouldn't use it at school, you're ignoring your responsibility. When I was a little kid, they'd be like, don't talk to strangers. If a stranger asks you to get in his car, don't go in the car, no matter what the stranger tells you. So these are the conversations that you need to have, because I think there's this assumption that things are regulatable to some degree. Like, we made efforts to restrict young people from doing kind of certain things. We encourage them and we restrict them. But here it's absent taking away your child's phone, computer, watch, which will probably cause them to kill you. There's really not a lot we could do. So it really comes with agency and personal responsibility. I see a lot of comments on LinkedIn about everyone wants regulations and all these things. It's okay. We come up with a regulation. How's it really going to get enforced? How's it going to apply? Regulation is almost like everyone's go-to magical thing. In the world, there are these things. There are reports, there are white papers, there are regulations. And I just don't really know. They're useful in that they bring things to people's attention, but what are you really going to accomplish from that? If you want to know, you don't need a report on If you go find some bad characters on character AI, just have a conversation with them. You don't need a report to show you that. Maybe some of that is inappropriate. These things, these personal assistants are going to scale across the society. And I think we need to start having conversations with students about that, not just imagining that we can ban them.
Okay, so let's get into something a little bit deeper here, okay? Because me and you talk about this all the time. We've talked about a couple of things. We talked about traffic lights, we talked about magic school, we talked about all these different things. Now, the same comment, we are thinking through this in real time. So this might sound a little not so coherent, but to me, these are the conversations, these are the questions people need to be asking. So Common Sense Media puts out this whole thing saying, under 18, social companions should not be allowed. So, on the one hand, you have Common Sense Media saying these are the AI companion safety standards, okay? So, one of the first things off the bat that I see as a huge discrepancy or something people should look into when looking at Common Sense Media, they actually classify, it looks like at first glance, companions, like social AI companion and AI chatbots as two separate things, which I personally, like, I want your 2 cents on that real quick. Let's just talk about that. The difference between a chatbot and a companion, like an AI chatbot or an AI companion. Your 2 cents really quick.
They're based on the same kind of underlying technologies, right? And they're capable of doing the same things.
Okay,
I
perfect.
think of a companion in terms of the conversation, right? Someone as a companion, they have fewer kind of restraints on maybe what the conversation can be about. Then you're going to try to maybe get on Chat GPT. Nonetheless, right? So there's that intuitive distinction. Now there's a similarity because, like I say, if you go on character AI, you can get a professor chatbot and talk about intellectual property. So it's not that kind of a clear of a distinction. And of course, some of the same some of the considerations, right, they consider to be problematic are the same, that you kind of get addicted to this conversation, that you think the thing can kind of become your friend. People are using ChatGPT and all the other mainstream frontier AI is mental health kind of counselors. That's actually the number one use of chatbots
Wait,
across
like,
the
literally,
internet.
totally. And that's literally the point that chatbots and companions are one in the same. You could
Yeah,
use chatbot for therapy, as the Harvard Business Review showed, is the number one use case. Or you can have a very specifically designed AI companion. Now, the reason I want to bring this up is one of the things that Common Sense Media is known for and trusted for. And I just want to say, when we have conversations like this, it's not to say that something is right or something is wrong. It's to say these are questions that are really worth discussing and questions that deserve answers when people put out these kinds of blanket statements without a lot of context and without a lot of discussion. So one of the things that people really trust Common Sense for is looking at apps. Like, should we use this app? Should we not? So now if you go to their expert review section, okay, where they kind of rate and rank all these different applications, let's just take two of the most popular chatbots. And both of these chatbots, even though there are ways teachers can use them, both of these are sold for students. So for example, one of them is Magic School AI. And
yeah,
at least my understanding from people that I've talked to that purchase this is that they charge you per student license. And one of the
right.
reasons a lot of people gravitate to Magic School is because they say there is no other AI for students that we can use, and we've got to have students on these chatbots or they're not going to be prepared for the future. Now, the same company that's telling you AI companions, which we can agree are chatbots, should not be available for kids under 18, are now the same ones that are giving Magic School a 4 out of a 5-star ranking when it comes to learning, a 4 out of a 5-star ranking when it comes to community. And when it comes to privacy, hey, 93%, which a lot of people debate. But my point is, when they look at the pros, okay, let's look at this one. Pros, it's an approachable tool with many options for desired outputs for learning. They have some cons over here, that there's some things that are too open-ended, so you might be limited by the pre-made templates. But let's go to the other one, School AI, which people specifically say is for kids. Okay. Again, a 4 out of 5-star ranking on learning, a 4 out of 5-star ranking on community based on the 5 reviews that are there. But get this, the pros. Chatbots are a fun way to become curious about specific characters and subjects. Many other teacher-focused AI tools built in data privacy are top of mind. The con relies on generative AI materials, which can be inaccurate, and there should be teacher involvement. So somebody is really going to have to sit and explain to me, one, how you're differentiating a chatbot from a companion. Number two, how teaching a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, heck, a 30-year-old to differentiate between a chatbot and a companion. And how is this going on? Because to me, I'm borderline going to call it irresponsible when we're thinking about the future of kids.
If you look at some of those criteria, learning, I'm sure there's learning bots and character AI that are just as effective as the learning bots and school AI or magic school or whatever. It doesn't make any
Or
sense,
Pilot
right? Like,
or Ply or any of the other ones that
right, or anything. They're very similar, right? In terms of what they do, privacy settings, you could probably set your own privacy settings in character AI versus things. To me, like the only it's okay, maybe within character AI or replica, I haven't even looked at that one. Maybe within those, there are some bots that are designed to trigger conversations that we don't want kids to have. But even then, it just based on what you just talked about, that's not what they're saying, right? They're just saying in this school AI one, you can learn and you have privacy. I'm really skeptical that there's any measurable difference between a learning bot in character AI and a learning bot like in Magic School. I'm sure Magic School doesn't have one that's like encourages you to have an inappropriate conversation with somebody. But that to me is a decision. It's like they're missing some definitional distinctions. And also to me, it's just like it imagines that we can regulate away these more difficult conversations somehow. Not obviously because kids can use anything outside of school, which can even be in the building, like on their phone. And it make them mad. Oh, if you have school AI, the kids are only going to do appropriate things. It's they can do anything they want on their own device while they're present in the school. You don't have to go on the school Wi-Fi. So I think it's almost like a pill that schools can take to give them this false sense of security that we're covered here. You know what I mean? It'd be like if you didn't want to teach sex ed because you thought, okay, there's no way someone can have sex in the school. So we're just going to not teach sex ed because we prevented the students from doing that in the school. To me, if you want to teach that and being responsible and those types of things, then, but which we do, right? We teach that pretty much in school, right? As part of health curriculum. Then it's also, we should be teaching these other things in school and not just pretending because like on this one basic chatbot, these are all chatbots, right? This one basic chatbot, you can't do this one particular thing.
Yeah. And I think, again, I just go back to like, this is like we are living through so much complexity. This
Yeah.
is so hard stuff. The world is literally changing. And these kind of blanket statements, of course, I'm going to go into the traffic lights, all of these
Mm.
things, they just don't teach people how to navigate their world. And I always say how I honestly think in a few years, we're going to look back at how we talked about social media and laugh and just wish that's all we had to deal with. Can we
Right, right.
go back to the time when social media was like the worst thing ever that happened to how we had to deal with kids and all the other issues that came along with it? Because I actually don't think enough people sit with this idea of what it means when you have, and that's why I like that he's brave enough to call it a species, because it really is. It is a digital species. It is a new entity. Humans are no longer the exclusive group that operate in this way. You now have a digital species that is doing the same, and in many ways, far outdoes many humans, right? I really think by the end of this year or next year, someone's going to say they have their version of AGI, right? Now, for me,
Right.
I would say like my AGI is if it's better than you. If you're looking from a
Mm.
corporate America standpoint, if it's better than you, red flag for you right there. But when you have this kind of new species and you want to simplify it down to red, yellow, green, or under 18 can't use it, it's just not only is it so unrealistic, it's negligent in that you are just ignoring a problem that fails to help young people really understand the complexities and also I think doesn't give them enough credit. Because one of the things I've always been so in awe of with my niece and nephew and my sister and brother-in-law and how they raise them is they talk to them like adults. They explain things to them. They don't try to shield them from things. Even with a phone, like my nephew could see, like my sister really helped him see, this is when he was 5, really helped him see how being on a device was affecting his behavior and his mood. And I kid you not, I'm not going to say that he doesn't want it anymore at all. Like, again, unrealistic, but he's so much more self aware because she talked him through. And I asked her, I was like, why don't you just take it away from him? Like, why? And she goes, we don't live in a world where you can do that anymore. She goes, you have to explain things to them. And that trust that even though, yes, you might be 6, yes, you might be 10, yes, you might be 15, we need to start talking to young people like people, not just little robots that we can control, and stop thinking of the world as siloed between inside of school and outside of school. Because that's why I say negligent, because to me, it just passes the responsibility onto someone else, right? Which we're going to get to in a moment, because there is a group of people out there who are educating parents probably better than most places are. Like this common sense media guide, if you were to give that to a parent, what does that even do to help them navigate the complexities of this? But yeah, I just think it's very negligent. But anyways, we should get into our next story, which is basically another day, another memo, right? And we're going to get to a point. I don't even think we're going to keep covering every single one.
Yeah.
I do think it's important for people to see the theme. And the big theme that I want to call out from this is all it takes is one person. I know a lot of you listening to this podcast are leaders. And so the one reason we're going to talk about this again today is because all it takes is one person. The CEO of Shopify was brave enough to put his memo out there, to put that vision out there, even though obviously a lot of people are like, oh, I'm unsubscribing and I'm leaving and I'm going whatever. He doesn't care. He knows where the future is. And that's what it means to be a leader. And once he did it, CEO of Duolingo did it, CEO of Box did it. And there's this ripple effect now where people feel they have permission to say what they are quietly thinking and building behind closed doors. So Duolingo, another day, another memo, basically declared they are going AI first, not just enhancing things with AI, not augmenting with AI, not just, oh, curious, but no, we are going to be AI first. And the CEO, Louis Van On, basically said, we'll gradually stop using contractors to do work that AI can handle. AI use is going to be part of what we evaluate in performance reviews, something very similar that we heard from Shopify. And again, the same thing, headcount will only be given if a team cannot automate more of their work. And again, I just want to say these are not futuristic scenarios. These are not hypotheticals. This is the reality of today for how people are designing work. And these are the new conditions. And one of the things that I think gets really missed in the headlines is they want to replace people. And yes, there's an element of that. If people cannot do what people are meant to do. Throughout all of these, I feel the way the CEOs reinforce, hey, we care about people. And this is us encouraging you to be more ambitious with the goals you set, the projects you think about. And when you think about how they're talking in that way, here's what I think is so interesting. On the one side, you have leaders who are basically redoing their whole org charts. In fact, the Microsoft Work Index said that we're not even going to have org charts anymore. We're going to have work charts, right? Shared amongst things. Like the whole structure of how we even think about work is going to change. And then on the education side, one of the most trusted organizations is will block this for kids under 18. And I know they were just talking about social companions, but as we made that correlation between Magic School, School AI, ChatGPT being the therapist as the number one use case, you just begin to see how unrealistic and how just really unsophisticated the conversation is in the education space to prepare people for the workspace.
One thing what we're trying to do is get people to use AI teammates, as you call them, or assistants, like in a productive way. And it can be in a work productive way. It can be in a socially productive way. It can be in an emotionally, psychological productive way. Obviously, you can have a bad relationship with an individual, just like you can have a bad one with the chatbot. But I think part of what schools need to do is start helping students think about these things, start using these things. And I call them things. So if you think of tools or alien intelligence, or you could just call it extra intelligence, augmented intelligence, to get experience with it, right? Because if you don't have that, look, in ways, kids are going to get experience with it anyhow, but they're going to use them, right? So the idea is to try to have some conversations. We don't have all the answers yet, but to have that kind of productive experience, right? And a collaborative experience and an emotionally and socially a healthy, positive relationship. That's like kids go on the playground. You had to let off steam, but then the teachers watch to make sure they don't like beat each other up, or they're like, if they're mean to somebody, they're like, hey, in the world, you really shouldn't be mean to people. You should apologize, those types of things. It might not be those exact behaviors with chatbots or extra intelligence, right? And eventually soon here, robots. But we need to start figure out how to interact and socialize with these in a productive way. And school's not going to be an oasis, right? With the cell phone ban too, I think it's about control. I think people kind of overrate school. Maybe I underrate it a little bit, but people overrate. That's just, it's like school is where kids go to learn, but it's not the only place they learn things, right? They learn things now all day on their laptops and their phones, right? They can kind of social spaces, social media, they're always learning. Schools don't have the control of kind of knowledge, or whether it's content knowledge or how you should behave and interact with the world. Like almost every day that kind of slips further and further away. And it's going to completely slip away once you get to the kind of the point of what some people call this singularity, where the knowledge is just all around us. There's also this Dwarkesh, Mark Zuckerberg podcast floating around where Zuckerberg talks about, okay, we don't know exactly how it'll play out. It could be all in our glasses and we just look around and we see everything. And that may be bad. I may be walking down the street and look at you. And if I say, hey, can you tell me more about that person? Tell me about your whole life. And that'll be weird. But we're going to see the flowers and the trees and all that kind of stuff. And all that knowledge is going to be there, whether it's in the form of brain computer implant, whether we're physically in places because of holograms. All this, you can't just leave all that. It's not like kids are going to walk through the door and then you get some zap thing and all that stuff just going to disappear. And then they're going to enter an alternative reality in a physical school building that they're not even going to recognize because it's just so disassociated from the rest of the world. So the other thing that's there is a little concerning is it's almost we're planning to take kids back in time. It seems like the reaction to the present is to figure out how to get kids into the past. And I don't really see that is useful. Maybe in some instances it is, just like all of us should maybe take a break from the world and go hang out in a tent for the weekend or something like that. But it's not really realistic on a day-to-day basis. The schools are adapting to AI by trying to use the time machine, the DeLorean. It seems like every school wants to buy a DeLorean and go back in time. And I'm not saying they're doing that intentionally, but if you really think about what they're doing, they're trying to block out all the things that they can't control without realizing that it doesn't really work very well. And it's probably not very, very productive for people, right? Especially if you're going to say kids are going to spend most of their waking hours in school, and that school reality is going to be different from the reality of the everyday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes back to, again, why some of these models that we have, like this traffic light model and whatnot, I feel like so many things that I see now are designed to just ease the fears of adults. We are literally letting people's fears dictate our policy, our vision, in the hopes that, oh, if they can just get on board, then maybe we can take that next step instead of being bold enough. Actually, that's what made me think about. I was sharing this earlier, how it's really weird to me how many people spend time the portrait of a graduate. And now there's this new thing, the portrait of a teacher. And I feel that's the space people are so comfortable in. Whereas if you look at people's portraits and frameworks and all these things, there is nothing original whatsoever. Every single
Yeah.
person, the same words that you can find on the World Economic Forum skills chart, the same words you can find on the Durable skills chart. Now, the thing they'll often say is it's a chance for us to bring our community together to talk about the skills. And it's just, we're so far past that. Bring your community together, bring your people together, have these focus groups, have all of this discussion. But you need to start having it about topics now, not things. If you did that work 5 years ago, amazing. That was the time and place for it. And I think now when you look at how people are evolving, or you're going to a session to learn about somebody's AI journey, you can't start with their step one. You need to now figure out how you're going to do their entire process and their journey in the next couple of months for yourself. Not even months, I would say in 1 month, using the help of these AI tools so that you can actually start from the moment that you need to start at right now. Otherwise, all that happens is, instead of preparing people or protecting people, if that's what you're trying to do, you're really ultimately just delaying their readiness for what comes next. And I think that's the part that gets me, which is why I'm so vocal about this. It's going to be so tragic to see those people, because we are going to see them. I saw them during the pandemic. I saw them so much. I feel it literally left me traumatized. And now that's why I'm so vocal about this. But during the pandemic, I remember how many people were just like, how do I come up with another option for my career? How do I do something different? And the problem is,
Right.
in that moment, there's very little you can do. I don't want to say it's impossible. It's not impossible at all. But if you're the kind of person that had to wait for that moment, chances are you also don't really have the skills to now go so aggressively into doing what you needed to do and learn all those things and do all of that stuff. Again, impossible? No, but likely it's hard. And so one of the things that I thought was really interesting, it's so crazy how much happened in this 1 week. The other thing that I thought was really interesting while I was watching this stuff from Common Sense and this interview and all these other pieces was, I was at my sister's house and she's, oh, I just got this email from Google. And basically, they are now opening up Gemini to kids. And before they do this, they sent this email. So if you have a family plan on Google or anything like that, or if Google knows you've got kids in your space, basically what they said was, hey, Gemini apps are soon going to be available for your child. They can use it to ask questions, get homework help, write songs, and even set it as their mobile assistant. Now you'll get notified when they first access it. And here's a video and a conversation guide to talk about AI together. And I was like, you know what? Yes, they're a company that want to sell a product. Yes, there are 1,000 different things, but I want to know how many schools I can walk into that have given something like that. Google didn't issue a traffic light. Red when your kid can use it. Yellow, maybe. Green, totally okay. No, you're going to need to be a responsible parent who has conversations with your kid about how and when and where to use AI. So your point about learning not happening in school, in this scenario, you could be, companies are taking on a much greater responsibility in this moment for that, in this particular case, Google, versus what we see happening in most schools.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of the other thing with the traffic light is that. So one of the things AI struggle with is what's called an edge case. because it's a little bit outside the training data. So the kind of the famous, or one of the famous edge cases is they told the Waymo, if you get in an accident, you pull over at the side of the road. Somebody got in an accident, somebody's leg got stuck in the wheel, and it's still pulled over to the side of the road. Right. In that case, they made a rule that made some sense. That's what people generally tell you: if you get in an accident, if you can't pull over to the side of the road. And the reason that humans, and now they're better at that because they have more instances of the training data, is that humans can make those judgments. And part of it's a judgment. In this case, there's an obvious kind of answer. Gee, don't drag the person to the side of the road. In other cases, there's not. If you think about the trolley problem, which is just this philosophical problem. There's one person on one track laying there. There's one person, or there's three people on the other track laying there, and the train's careening down. If you have the power, would you, and it's currently careening down towards the three people. And if you have the power, you pull it to the one, because now you're responsible for what happens. So the point of bringing that up is there's kind of edge cases that are judgment calls, and we make those. You can't really make a rule, and everybody's going to handle them differently. And kind of the traffic light type system ignores the fact that there are edge cases, right, which we say humans are uniquely capable of. And I think because you do it, if you run scenarios that people respond in different ways, they don't fit so well into these categories. But to get back to our other conversation, a lot of the point is that with these edge cases, you want to essentially help people deal with edge cases, right? Okay, what's this chatbot that's trying to get you to chat? Do you really want to chat with that chatbot? Or do you really, even if it's not a particular chatbot, it's, oh, how this conversation is starting to end up in this place, let's stop it. People do that sometimes. You're maybe joking around and then the conversation gets a little weird. And you're like, okay, probably not really appropriate line of conversation to continue, even though you didn't intend to have an inappropriate, say something awkward or inappropriate. You realize and you pull back. But if you just don't let kids have any experience, you try to remove them from the world that actually exists, then there's no opportunity for those conversations. There's no opportunities for those experiences. For people who think kids can't learn with adults without adults in school, then to me, this is something that the value a human brings, that they can help guide a student through these cases, just like we talk to them about other things they maybe should or shouldn't do, and get them to think through it. Because we're not, even if there was this magic AI czar that was just regulatory, which we're not going to have, at least in the United States, we're going in the direction. Right. So it's not going to happen. You can issue as many reports as you want saying all these things are going to be regulated. The current administration's obviously not going to regulate them. Even if they did, how are these things going to be enforced? What do people really imagine that the police are going to show up and be like, hey, kid, you used this chatbot you weren't supposed to use. They're going to haul you off to juvenile crime. Meanwhile, someone down the street's robbing the Walmart. And they're like, oh, we'll get to that later. This kid used this inappropriate chatbot, right? Like, it's not, some of it could be civil. It's not just criminal, but it's easier said than done. So the practical solutions are actually the ones that involve having the conversations, because, okay, Google, everybody knows Google. A lot of people are on Google, Gemini, right? Available to under 13. So it's going to cause more people to use it, but there's plenty of other things on the App Store that under 13 use and can utilize. So I think people, and I don't think they're doing it consciously or intentionally, but they're applying old world solutions to new world problems, and old world solutions don't solve new world problems. So and then the DeLorean's not real.
Absolutely. And so again, I would probably just close off this one before we go to the next
Yeah.
topic is, who do you want to onboard your kid, Google or you? And it really shouldn't even be an either or. It really should be like a partnership between the places being able to do this. And if you're looking for an example of what this looks like, Desert Sands Unified School District put out an incredible AI guidance with a framework for how to evaluate these use cases, for how to approach these scenarios. It's probably one of my favorite projects that we've been able to work on, but we will link that for you in the show notes. And I think they're an incredible resource, that the entire team, they're open to chatting, they're open to communicating. We should actually bring them on for an interview. It'd be a great idea to chat with them through why they did what they did. But the point is that at a time where, again, a lot of people want you to think, we don't know what the future brings. There's never been, this is, to me, Ethan Mollick is like a blessing and a curse to the AI world, because it's so interesting to me how people can see somebody, and this is, again, whether it's common sense, whether it's a person, it doesn't matter. People take people and just like whatever they say at their word without critically analyzing. And it's so interesting at a time when we know critical thinking and question asking is so important. If there is one skill you should work on, it is anytime you read something or see something, ask what is the other side of that? Like, what else should I be considering? So one of the things he posted the other day, he said, one mistake a lot of companies struggle with is that they want to hire an AI leader to solve their problems with AI. Yes, lots of experts know traditional machine learning AI, but there are no Gen AI leaders who have years of experience. You can't hire someone who is really good at driving AI transformation with Gen AI because these people are all working on their first projects and we're all figuring it out at the same time. And I cannot say how much I disagree with that statement. If the premise is Gen AI is a teammate, working with generative AI as a teammate, do people have any idea how much research? Again, I'll go back to Google. Google, I think they do such an amazing job with research and reports, but you want two people who have been studying the space inside out, which slowly every report and data is just basically saying what these people have been saying for years. That again, if you go back to Mustafa Suleyman, it's the same strategies that just apply to a different species. And that is Amy Edmondson, right? Who talks about psychological safety and how we work together as great teams and the norms and values we need to create. And Google with their project Aristotle, what makes a great team. Now, I'm not saying those are plug and play Gen AI handbooks, but I'm absolutely going to say if you're a Gen AI leader, you have research, you have strategies, you have tools that are evidence-based, that are backed by research, that have such strong case studies that you can lean into. And so I just think people need to be really careful in this moment. Like, you
Yeah,
are,
and I think too that the purpose of the leader isn't always to have all the answers. The purpose of
yeah,
the leader is to initiate the discussions. And there are people who know enough to initiate the discussions. And you do want to make sure it's not just technical, right? To the point of what you brought up. But I do think it's important to have someone to maybe lead and take some initiative and kick it around because I think some people are just, I'm afraid of AI and do want to move. But it does in a way too. It almost seems a separate point you brought up there at the end, but it's not. The point is we need to start talking about these things instead of showing up. No one's going to show up at your business with like a rule book unless, there's some huge security or privacy law that applies in a particular thing. Here's the 20 ways you can use a generative AI and here's the 48 ways you can't. So I think that you need to have these conversations, start these discussions, start using it, manage your own edge cases, and don't rely on unimplementable solutions.
there we go. The podcast in 3 sentences for today's episode. All right, let's get into the next topic. And the next one, again, this is a complicated one. So I have an appointment where I am going to the Orb to go and verify that I'm a human and get my world ID. And if you don't know what we're talking about, basically this week, Sam Altman and Alex Blania, who I believe is the CEO or manages Tools of Humanity, basically launched what they called WorldCoin using their device that is, they call it the Orb. And it's basically this biometric device that scans your iris or eye and issues you what they call a world ID and a cryptocurrency wallet. Now, I am not a crypto person, so this is the first time I'm going to step into this space. But basically, their goal is to prove and verify that you are human in an internet, basically a world that is filled with AI agents. So they say in a world covered with bots, we need a way to know who's real. And what began, they said, as sort of a crypto project is now becoming this digital passport that is tied to your physical identity and basically linked to your online life. There are 7 locations so far in the United States where you can go and do this. But what I found even more fascinating about this launch was that the CEO of Visa basically did a really great interview. And we're going to link all of this for you down below in the show notes. But the CEO of Visa basically did an interview saying that we're now going to have AI agents that can search, compare, and purchase on your behalf. He said, we'll all have agents that scour the world's inventory for what we need. And we're giving them AI-enabled Visa credentials so they can make payments for us with rules, spending limits, and preferences baked in. So again, I go back to how are people defining chatbot companion? Like to me, they're all this one, again, digital species is not going to be a person where you go to multiple people for different things. Sometimes this one teammate of yours could help you with multiple things. It could start off with, I need to purchase like a water filter from my fridge from Amazon. And I just had this conversation with my sister about this topic and it turned tense. What should we do? Oh, and I also need to plan a trip. And man, that meeting I've got to do on Monday morning. This is an all-encompassing tool that's going to support you in multiple ways. All right. So they also said this is not just an AI assistant, but a financial representative, agents who act with your permission, but potentially without your presence. So we've got tutors, AI friends, IDs, now AI shoppers. And again, nothing hypothetical. I'm going in to go get mine. And I just feel the irony is when we see things like the Common Sense Media Report, we just see things like traffic lights. It just seems that people who this world is actually going to be a reality for, because I feel if you're my dad or maybe even me and you could totally opt out of this world, my nephew, I don't think is going to be able to opt out of this world, or my niece, or a 10-year-old today, or even a 20-year-old today. So this idea that we can opt out is maybe an option and a luxury for some people, but we have to think about those people who can't. And I just thought these two things together were just really interesting news pieces. We'll be talking about this a lot more, but I would definitely, this is to me what I call signals. Even though Visa and the Orb, different companies, different entities, different everything,
Right.
there's like huge complementarity between their goals.
The only thing I'd follow up with, we're starting to see, and we'll talk about this in other podcasts, but more and more personal assistants, whether they're co-pilots or Perplexity, rolling out some kind of personal assistant technology. And yeah, we're going to want to know that these AIs are interacting with actually who you are. What you're talking about is the foundation really of personal assistants, personal shopping assistants, Visa, MasterCard, credit card, all these types of things. That's very interesting and important.
So the last topic we're going to do is another essay actually that was shared, who just writes long essays that are amazing, but they're always so long, is the urgency of interpretability. Now, one of the things that we have talked about a lot on this podcast is AGI. And I always say, like, I will always remember you, Stefan, as the person who talked about it before anyone else was willing to talk about it. Whereas now it's just such a common word. And like we said, we do think that pretty soon in the next 1 to 2 years, you're going to see somebody say that, yeah, we've reached quote unquote AGI. But if we were to try to tie together all the different things that we talked about today, from the orbs to the AI agents to the companions or chatbots, I feel his essay on interpretability really is the unifying factor in some ways. And he's not just anyone, right? So again, when you see things like this and read things like this, it's so easy to think this is some kind of science fiction or that's somebody who's so out there. But this is a guy who's one of the frontier labs, right? He's the CEO of Anthropic. Claude is one of the top used AI tools. And basically what he says is people always find it weird when we tell them we don't actually know how these systems work. And he thinks that's something that we need to talk about because it's an actual danger. So he makes the case that AI isn't traditional software. It's not built line by line. It's grown. So again, like a person, right? Yeah, sure. In the beginning, we teach you things step by step, but as you get older, you have your own personality and you make your own interpretation of things. And he says, because of that, we can't explain why it does what it does. He says, that's not a bug. That's the core danger. He says people outside the field are often surprised and alarmed to learn we don't understand how our own AI creations work, and they're right to be concerned. This lack of understanding is unprecedented in the history of technology. And he basically says that we're now in this race between the growing and expanding intelligence of the models and our ability to understand them. And so the only way he says we can stay in control is by investing in interpretability, the AI equivalent of an MRI, so we can diagnose what's going on before these systems become too powerful to contain. And he says this isn't about doomsday or something like that. This is really a leadership message that we have to, and it's just why I go back to the complexity of these issues. We can't hit pause, right? No one's going to hit pause on this. There's too much like economic like stuff at stake, but we can be more mindful about how we have the conversation and how we prepare people to evaluate the use and how the choices they make as this technology just rapidly accelerates.
Yeah. I mean, understanding what's going on, and it's important to safety at a broad level. It's important to safety at a micro level because you might be able to redirect some of what it's doing. And of course, you want to understand any technology that's very powerful. Yeah, I think that's really, really important.
So all of the conversations we share today are not something really to make you panic. They are an invitation to lead, an invitation to help create clarity through conversation, through courage, but ultimately through a commitment to preparing the next generation for the world that they are going to be living in. Again, a world that is not a hypothetical, a world that is not a futuristic scenario, but that is a world that we are currently co-creating together. So let's design it, and we will see you in our next episode.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.